Have you ever come to a moment in life where the surface of everything you've known begins to crack? Maybe it's subtle, a thought that doesn't align, an intuition that nags at you quietly. Or perhaps it's something jarring, a sudden realization that hits with such force it's impossible to ignore. Well, I think most of us have faced something like this. Even if we don't recognize it right away, that feeling, a sense of dissonance, can be unsettling. But sometimes those cracks are where the light begins to shine through. I didn't see it that way at first. It was confusing, even painful. But looking back, those moments of dissonance were where my deeper understanding of spirituality began. I'm Mark Roach. Welcome to Transcendent. This space is for those who are chasing their authenticity, their truth, their essence. It's not an easy road to walk, and as you hear my story, my own path has been anything but straight. My perspective has been shaped by a lot of extremes, a long, winding road across the full spectrum of human experiences, from incredible joys and unimaginable difficulties. I've studied with mystics, healers, worked alongside titans in business and film, even lived amongst people bearing the weight of incredible pain, and learned as much from failure as I have from success, if not more. When I first created this platform, I thought it might speak to people, like me, who are living with complex PTSD, with trauma, and those that are battling some internal struggles that go unnoticed by most other people. But the more that I share, the more I realize something is universal. Everyone carries some of that hurt, whether it's sharp and immediate or a distant ache that we ignore until later. We all wrestle with our human fragility and our longing for something more. Now, this space is for anyone who feels called to break out of those old cycles of life that no longer serve what you're here for, or what you think that you want or need, or who you want and need in your life. It's for those ready to step into an era of feeling like you're achieving something special that means something inside you. Maybe it's your uniqueness, and maybe it's a sense of rediscovering your divinity, your creativity, your humanity, that part of you that isn't a performance, that isn't a reaction to the world, but to a connection to something deeper. Now, as a child, Christianity was all around me. It was a foundation of my world, in fact. It was woven into prayers and routines and the air that I breathed. It brought a sense of safety sometimes, but more so through the esoteric truths that I read in the Bible and that my father shared with me and helped me see in the community and in others around me. Yet I could sense his struggle to reconcile these truths with the realities of life. And over time, I came to respect his wrestling with this dissonance. The deeper spirituality that resonated so strongly for me felt lost in those rigid rules, in the language, and quite frankly, in the energy of those who claimed superior understanding. Their egos, the power struggles, the battles, the polarities, the intensity felt more like a performance than a reflection of true faith. There was this neediness in it all. something I later recognized as unhealthy, an effort toward dominance or to be one bit smarter or better or closer to God than your fellow man, which put others down in the process. Sometimes, in a very innocent way. Maybe they weren't meaning to do that, but it was kind of baked into this era of mastery and dominance. But from a very young age, I felt something else beneath the surface. It wasn't faith that I resisted. Faith in its purest form was alive to me, pulsing through the poetic cadences of what I struggled to understand in this King James Bible, this Old English, forced me to go back and look deeper for the meaning of words that nobody ever used in real life. And those words filled with truths, and I could feel them. But it was very difficult, and I really struggled with the way those words were packaged and the institutions around them. I looked at the practices, at the rules that seemed rigid and unyielding and judgmental, and often seemed more concerned with appearances and order than with love, unity, or humility, which I saw in Jesus. People seemed more focused on keeping the rules than living by the principles, the deeper principles inside, from the inside. And that dissonance stayed with me as I grew older. It made sense now. Many have moved away from those lifestyles and practices, rejecting the judgments in search of something deeper, a way of living that embraces coexistence, acceptance, and true compassion, the kind that Jesus himself embodied before he was silenced. I didn't leave these things behind out of rebellion. If anything, it was the opposite. I deeply wanted to understand. There were moments that Jesus' words leapt off the page to me. The kingdom of God is within you. What did that even mean? How did that align with the way the church or institution viewed God as something external, distant, and separate? I and my Father were one. Well, I wrestled with that one for years. Did he mean unity isn't something out there to grasp, but something inherent, already present and waiting? I wasn't getting clarity from the systems that I was part of, so I began searching elsewhere. That's where I discovered Alan Watts. If you aren't familiar with him, he did a lot of comparative religion work, and he was a brilliant thinker, someone who bridged the gaps between Eastern and Western spiritual philosophies. He had this way of cutting through the excess to show you the raw, beating heart of an idea. Watts didn't outright reject Christianity, but he held it up to the light in a way that exposed both its beauty and its flaws. He argued that Christianity, at its roots, was not meant to be the rigid, dogmatic institution we experience today. The first followers of Christ were regular people. They became mystics, and their faith wasn't about following rules, but about having a direct personal experience with the divine. Watts compared Christianity of today to a tree that had once been wild and alive, but had been cultivated to fit the needs of an institution. The mystical, vibrant essence had become buried beneath the layers of control, hierarchy, and fear, judgment. He spoke about how many religious traditions, particularly Western ones, present God as a cosmic potter and humanity as the clay, a creator separate from his creation, and yet Christ seemed to suggest something far more intimate. The Father is in me, and I am in the Father. Watts pushed back against separation. What if God wasn't apart from us, but within us? What if God wasn't the potter standing over the clay, but the life coursing through every part of it, indistinguishable from the creation itself? This reframing was a revelation for me. He also pointed out the stark contrast between belief and faith. Belief, as Watts described it, is grasping onto something to feel secure. It's clinging onto ideas, dogmas, and structures because they give us a sense of order. Faith, on the other hand, is trust, openness, and surrender. It's letting go of control and expectations and outcomes and being willing to move within the currents of life, without knowing where they'll take you. Belief clings, but faith lets go. That was his way of summing it up. And to me, this echoed the teachings of Jesus in the way that I hadn't heard it in church before. Christ said, "Do not worry about tomorrow. Do not be afraid." But so often Christianity, as I experienced it, felt rooted in fear and control. When Watts spoke of mysticism, it seemed like he was describing something both ancient and new. Mysticism wasn't about rules or rituals, but about awakening to the unity that's already there. The kingdom of God is within you, not something to achieve or earn, but something innate, here and now. This is where Watts' exploration of Eastern philosophies provides such vital insight. Traditions like Buddhism and Hinduism don't view the divine as far off or hidden behind gates. Instead, the divine is understood as the ground of being, as something so close that we often miss it. It's not about climbing toward God, but about realizing God is already present, immanent in every atom of existence. The shift in thinking isn't just beautiful, it's necessary. We live in a world where more people are beginning to see that the old systems are cracking under the weight of their own rigidity. The transparency of our age has laid bare how institutions of power and political, religious, and financial often prioritize survival over truth and conformity over connection. And yet humanity is waking up. Ancient truths about our divine nature and interconnectedness are resurfacing, but these truths come to us raw, without structure or context, which is why so many people feel lost, even as they wake up. If there's one thing Watts taught me, and the one thing I want to pass on, is this: your divinity isn't something you need to find. It's something you already are. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world." Not a possibility, not a conditional. It simply is. Awakening isn't about becoming, it's about remembering. And the same is true for our connection with others. We become so afraid, so protective, that we feel isolated, even though we belong deeper than we can express. This isn't just philosophy to me, it's a practice. Every day, in big ways or small moments, I try to live into that truth. It's not always easy to trust that the ground beneath you, even when it feels shaky, will hold you up. But each time I reconnect to that truth, I feel closer to Watts and to what Jesus before him were pointing out. I'm Mark Roach. This is Transcendent. Wishing you all the best.